Good morning or afternoon, depending where you are joining us from. I'm so glad that everybody came today to join us at Future Good Storyteller Camp. So I'd like to say hello, Tansy, Anin, and bienvenue. Still working on my French, folks. We'll see how it goes. Um, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Elisha Dacey, and I am Future of Good's Managing Editor, and I'll be with you through all three events today. Before I introduce our panelists, I do want to take a moment to recognize that I'm coming to you from Winnipeg in Treaty 1 territory, and we're located on the original lands of the Anishinaabeg, the Innuak. I should have practiced that one. The Anishinaabeg, and the Dakota, Oyotai, and Dene. I swear I won't mess that up as much for the next time. Manitoba is also the homeland of the Red River Métis. So some housekeeping before we begin. While this is a panel discussion, I do strongly encourage you to utilize the Q&A function on Zoom. And don't be afraid to ask questions wherever you like, and we will do our best to get to them as we go through the discussion today. So I'm going to introduce our first panelist, and that is Kim Ruse of Fear is Not Love. And Kim, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Ruse. I'm the CEO of Fear is Not Love, based in Calgary, Alberta. And we are an organization that serves about 20,000 Albertans every year. We provide support to people who experience violence as well as people who use violence. And so we don't consider ourselves a women's organization. We actually consider ourselves an anti-violence organization, which I'll get into in a little bit. But thank you very much for having me on this panel today.
Thanks so much, Kim. And Katelin, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name's Katelin. I am at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, where I'm a behavioral research scientist. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection, or C3P, we're dedicated to the personal safety of all children, and in particular, working to reduce the incidence of children who are sexually exploited and abused, increasingly in the online spaces, and as well as bringing missing children home.
Thanks, Caitlin. So full disclosure, I'm just going to let folks know that about 10 years ago, I did work for the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. I did not have the chance to work with Caitlin, unfortunately, but I'm very familiar with their work. Fear is Not Love is new to me, but comes with a stellar reputation and some really interesting stories. And I know that both of you have some really, really fascinating stories to tell today about how language shapes us and some of the ways that you folks have used language and helped rewrite language to affect change. And it seems like a simple thing or a small thing, but I've noticed some really big results. So Kim, I'm going to start with you. We talked a little bit about Fear is Not Love when we talked less and some of the things that you have done, but over the past, I guess about a decade, it sounds like you guys have made some drastic changes, and it did start with language, including what you call yourselves and what has exploded from that. So I'm
Sure.
going to let you tell the story instead of me blabbing on. Kim.
Sure. Thanks. Well, certainly we talk a lot about domestic violence as being a public safety issue and not a women's issue, which is a little bit controversial, but it starts with our name. And so our old name was the Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter. And that's a great name. And I was told when I came to the role 11 years ago, don't ever change your name. And you can imagine it's a beacon. People know what you do, Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter. However, when you hear that name, you think shelter, you think women, and certainly, people will come to that name. They will come to that place when they know what, if they think they need shelter. What was happening, however, though, when I came to the organization, one of my first orientations was when you go out there and you public speak, you have to use the tagline, more than a shelter, more than a shelter, more than a shelter. And the reason that I was told to use that tagline was because less than 3% of our clients used shelter. And so I would end up spending time, every public speaking engagement was, "Hi, I'm Kim from Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter, and we're more than a shelter." And I'd have to explain away, explain away. And then we ended up having a consultation with stakeholders around our fundraising. And very quickly, we realized that we had a problem with our name. So 67% of our clients that we talked to, unprompted, unencouraged, said, "Your name's a problem." And we learned very quickly that people were not coming to us until they were in the backseat of a police car because they thought they needed to be in an emergency situation to call us. They thought they needed to be in need of a shelter to call us, and they didn't want to bother us. And so very quickly we realized that we were actually, our name was a block to people reaching out for help. So first of all, we weren't just Calgary, we were Alberta wide, and in some contexts, we were actually nationwide in our services. We were not working with just women. Our largest client group was children, and we also worked with men. And we were not just for emergency situations, and we were not just a shelter. And so the name was actually stopping people from getting the help that we needed. And we were trying to be a movement. We didn't want to be just a service. We were trying to be more of a call to action, a line in the sand, and a rally cry actually in the media. And so we changed our name. And so, it actually has led to some drop in donations. Some donors were not happy that we changed the name, but it led to a 17% increase in the first year after changing our name in calls, in particular from men. And not just men who are victims, but men who are using violence actually started to call us. And last year alone, we had 4,000 men who were concerned about their behavior call our men's helpline. And so and youth in particular as well are using that phrase, like fear is not love. It's actually a statement that you can actually use to look at your relationship and realize, am I in fear? Am I causing fear? So it's a different kind of a way to evaluate your relationships, evaluate, what are you dealing with in your life, rather than Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter. So we still run Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter. It didn't disappear, but it actually is a program in an umbrella of more of a movement. And so we're using that as a starting point, but we still are out there talking about, domestic violence as a public safety crisis. And we still use that as a launch pad for our other initiatives around language, encouraging police, for example, to, using the mass casualty report that came out of Nova Scotia as a launching point to talk about, the language that when there's a domestic violent incident and people talk about, oh, no one else is at risk. Yes, we are all at risk. It is a public safety issue, but that name has really been a flashpoint in Alberta anyway, to really start that conversation and shift how we think about the issue of domestic violence in our personal lives and in our families, in our communities, in our workplaces. So yeah, it's been a great conversation starter, and not always positive because I think not everyone loves it, but that's okay, right? That's okay. It's been a great position to start from.
Katelin, as much as I want to talk to Kim, and I feel like I could talk to probably both of you for hours and hours about this, but I want to jump over to you. Reason being is the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, when I worked there, I was in media, and then I had worked at the center. And while I was at the center, I learned about why it was so important, why language became such a flashpoint for the center. While I was there, I learned a lot of language around child sexual abuse. And I also learned why the center was pushing for media, especially to use things like child sexual abuse imagery instead of child porn in headlines and in the way we describe things. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and what it's led to?
Yeah, absolutely. It has been, as you said, a very long-standing issue, and one that we, as well as not just ourselves, but also survivors and other allies, have worked for quite some time. We learn from survivors themselves, whether through operating our tip line, cybertip.ca, which is the national clearinghouse for reports or experiences of kids who are experiencing child sexual abuse or exploitation online. That using child pornography as opposed to child sexual abuse material just is not even close to accurate at all. In our 2017 survey of international survivors around the world who'd experienced child sexual abuse. Many of them took the opportunity to tell us, actually even unprompted, how they felt that that term did not represent what happened to them. And lots of groups around the world agree. When we hear the term pornography, that's often associated with content that is legal, content that involves adults, and hopefully also content that involved consent. But when we're talking about a child, none of those things are even possible in that context. So what child pornography refers to, which is currently the Canadian legal term, those, as one survivor put it, those are actually photos from a crime scene. That is photos or videos of a child who has been sexually abused or exploited. It is illegal in many countries, especially including Canada, and it is by definition not involving adults, and certainly isn't something that's like produced in any sort of legitimate way. So when we use the language of child pornography, that really takes away from the public understanding of what that crime actually entails. It really demeans the experiences of the survivors themselves and just doesn't do it justice at all. So just as you experienced when you worked here, the C3P has a long history of working to correct those kinds of languages to try and improve public understanding, reduce victim blaming, and in ways to like lots of parallels to what Kim shared, if you yourself are a survivor and somebody trying to work through what's happened to you, seeing the language in media of child sexual abuse material is sure a lot more affirming and might make you more willing to come forward and seek the supports that you deserve in the aftermath of what's happened. So when we do things in two ways, I suppose, like proactively and reactively, we stopped using the term child pornography internally years ago. That's what we use all over our website, in our reports, in media interviews, and so on. And then on the flip side, we'll often work in a sort of a reactive way as well when we might happen to encounter headlines that talk about child porn or kiddie porn or even potentially child pornography as well. Often an email to the reporter or the news organization that kindly outlines, here are some of the disadvantages and probably unintended consequences of the language used. Here is the preferred language and the reasons why. And most of the time, we get really lovely responses back. Most recently, a few months ago, we'd had a similar situation with language in a news article that talked about a inappropriate sexual relationship between an adult and a child. And so same kind of thing, right? That's not this person had been criminally charged, so consent is not possible. It can't relationship has connotations of romance, consent, and so forth. The reporter was very responsive, wrote back very quickly saying, "Thanks so much. We actually really appreciate this opportunity to learn, and we've changed those details throughout the story." So yeah, on the whole, I think people have been really responsive over the years, and beyond the media headlines that we have worked to change, I think a really big win is that due to not just our efforts at all, but our efforts as well, survivors and other organizations. In October in Canada, the criminal code will be amended to change the language of child pornography to child abuse and exploitation material, which is just an incredible win.
I've got to say congratulations. I
Thank
know
you.
from personal experience, from my my year of working there, how hard the team has worked towards these kinds of changes. And then to see that happen and to actually affect criminal code changes must be so affirming to the work that C3P
Absolutely.
does. Yeah. So we are getting some questions. And so the first one here is for Kim. Um, our organization is setting to launch a men's helpline and counseling service for men who might become violent. It's meant to be preventative and not for those already involved in the justice system, and any tips on how to encourage men to reach out for help?
Absolutely. Happy to connect with me after as well. We can share our information on help seeking. Meet the guys where they're at. So we found in our research that if you can keep a guy on the line for 3.5 minutes, you're more likely to keep them on the line for half an hour. And typically what we find is that when guys call, they don't talk about their violence or the relationship in the beginning. They typically talk about depression, loneliness, and anxiety to begin with. And so meet them where they're at. Don't talk about patriarchy or masculinity in the first part of the conversation, and you're more likely to engage them. Typically, someone has said to them they're abusive or they need help. They're not going to tell you that up front. And so listen in the very beginning. We find, so we operate a men's digital engagement strategy as well, which you're welcome to connect your helpline to. And if you want to be on our map, we have a national map. And so we engage them through that. The number one article and toolkit that is downloaded is how to apologize to someone that you've hurt. So typically guys are reaching out for things like that. So we have articles, blog posts, that sort of thing. But typically they'll reach out with something that's easier or more appropriate, like more socially acceptable, and then you get to the real stuff. So start soft, start gentle, and also train your therapists really well on how to engage men. It is different. They typically don't call. By the time they're calling, they're really, really, really needing the help. So use chat, use other means first as well. So embed your helpline in other ways of engaging them. So yeah, connect with me through LinkedIn or reach out through, you can reach me through kim.ruse@fearsnotlove.ca. Happy to send the research that we have and the data from our helpline as well. We had 4,000 callers last year, and of the 4,000, just under half followed through with therapy. So yeah, great question. And we've been running our helpline since 2021. And so we went from 800 callers the first year to 4,000 last. It's tricky business getting the guys to call.
So another question that somebody had, and I think both of you can relate to this, but so Kim especially, how did you guys decide whether it was best to change your name for the organization or just to reinforce your messaging so that people know your cause is beyond the name of the organization? Like, why did you decide to go for a name change rather than, using that fear is not love messaging instead?
For us, it was a tough decision because I had donors saying, threatening me, do not change your name, whatever you do. We decided to change our name because it was the clients that were saying your name's a problem. And I had to make the call that who was the audience I was most interested in speaking to, and then who could I actually, spend the time engaging differently. To me, the more urgent audience was the client. The donors I could spend the time bringing around, but I needed to engage the people that needed the help first. So that it was just a call I felt I had to make that way. Yeah.
And did you hear from those donors? Like, did you
Oh,
manage to
yeah.
bring some of them around afterwards though?
Some of them, I lost a board member and I did lose some donors. They were like, I got handwritten notes. How dare you? And please give me your written policies that you are not serving, transgendered people. And I got all sorts of hate mail and I did lose some donors. I did bring some donors around. Like it took us sometimes a few years where I, spent time explaining, why this mattered. And, some did come around, some it took a while, and some I lost. But some I gained because there were other people that were, thank you for doing this, and thank you for seeing it differently. And but to me, it's the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do.
And Katelin, kind of the same question for you, why was it so important to change the language around this I mean, rather than just saying, changing your messaging to say that child pornography is bad, why was it important to actually change the term used?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think again, it comes down to who we're serving and what they need. Again, it just is really minimizes the trauma that is endured by child sexual abuse material survivors, not just at the time of the initial abuse, but that is ongoing often for them because that content might be online, circulating, downloaded by any number of people at any time, anywhere in the world. Like it's a massive, massive trauma that they are often dealing with, and to use words of pornography that again imply consent and adults and something that is for entertainment just is it doesn't do it. That's fully insufficient, and again can have victim blaming connotations as well, and doesn't also, in addition to not serving survivors, it doesn't serve the broader public as well to better understand and respond to these crimes against children.
You know, it takes a lot of courage to push back against a very mainstream uh, a mainstream term or a mainstream way of thinking, and it takes a lot of leadership to do that as well. I guess what I want to know, or maybe it could be helpful, you know, how do you find that courage? How do you decide, you know, when you've got donors telling you, well, I'm going to stop funding you if you do this, or I really oppose the name change, or when you have media saying to you, well, we use the term child porn because it fits in a headline better. How do you push back and find that courage to do that? Because that can be a scary thing for a nonprofit, especially when your funding is precarious. I don't know who wants to try and answer that question. It's a big one.
Yeah, for
Caitlin, I'm
us,
going to put you on the spot since you actually
I'll
did
try it. Yeah. We
it.
did, we mapped out a pretty robust like a change management process. We had stakeholder groups and we had the board involved at different points. There were scary moments. So like and it didn't go super smoothly all the time because our website, there was a process, wasn't going to be ready on time. And it was like 2 weeks of 24/7 getting it ready. And there were moments when I was like, okay, my career could be done. Like I could be fired and this could be it. You know, and it was like, okay, I'm going to take a last stand on this. And there were moments when I was like, yeah, I might be done, and I might have to move provinces. We'll see, because I don't know if you know much about Alberta, but this was risky in many ways. So I did my best to sort of involve as many stakeholders as I could, get as much momentum as I could. The name, like I felt really good about the name and built as much momentum as I could around it leading up to, and we unveiled it like it was really kept top secret. Had the board involved as much as I could. What happened, the reason I lost board members and donors is that we kept it secret. And when it was unveiled, there was backlash, right? And so there were key Calgarians, like founders, that did not like it. And so when they pushed back in different rooms, I lost a board member and lost some donors. But I had my board chair on side with me, and there was enough goodwill about the name, and the clients loved the name, right? So that was the key, was as long as like you can't go wrong with that. If the clients love the name, like that's your purpose. Like you have, so in my sort of, I guess, reasoning was you can't back away from that. Like that's your reason for being. Your reason for being is not your donors. Like there's no twisted way of making it that. So I figured I had a good leg to stand on with that. And then really I could walk away, right? Like if no one was going to stand with me on that, then I could walk away and then I'd be able to say, screw you guys, right? But my board was with me, like my board chair was with me on that. And so I figured we had a good leg to stand on with that. So, but it was scary. Like those first few weeks and months, it was scary. And there were you can still Google it. There's Reddit forums that said it was my vanity project. And, it hit the news. Like it was like other names and stuff. It was kind of funny. Other name changes, they don't hit the news, but mine hit the news.
Well,
It's
yours was your name change was it's a provocative one. You know, it went
Yeah,
from something that was very straightforward to something very broad that also said something broader about our society in
yeah,
general.
yeah.
And there's a lot of meaning in your 4 words.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that it hit the news. If I had been around, I definitely would have written a story for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was kind of surprised because there was my face everywhere. And I'm like, oh my goodness. What is
That was not the
happening,
goal.
right? Yeah. So, but I stand by it to this day, and we've leveraged it since then, right? Because it like, yeah, and so I stand by it to this day. And now other organizations, now they do press releases about their name changes, and I kind of laugh because it's like I wasn't trying to do that. I was just kind of quietly, let's just change this. But and now we use hoodies, and I laugh now because we have swag now. There's swag everywhere. And now if you wear your hoodie, I'm always careful. If I'm in a rush, I do not wear it to the grocery store because if I wear it out, people will stop me and say, "What does that mean?" And then as soon as you say what it is, everyone has a story. And so now I carefully, when I give them out, I warn people, and we actually give out cheat sheets with it about how to talk to people about the brand because it's a conversation starter, which to me, that's amazing, right? Because that's what it's supposed to be about. So that is like, that warms my heart because that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a conversation starter. It's supposed to be building community, and that's what the name change was supposed to be. But yeah, it was hard days. I'll tell you, the first 6 months of that brand change, I was like, what have I done?
Well, and Katelin, speaking of conversation starters, when I left C3P and I was back in a newsroom and I was lecturing lecturing my colleagues about wild child pornography was not appropriate for that headline, and trying to get them to change the language, it certainly started conversations in the newsroom. I suspect that when you do meet that kind of resistance, you get that kind of conversation as well. So are you folks able to leverage that in the way that you want for more positive change?
Yeah, I actually personally haven't experienced any pushback, which is not to say that it hasn't ever happened. But it is incredible how open and receptive people have been, despite it being the name still on the books in the criminal code. So it'll be really fascinating to see that change as we go forward. And Kim, your story is just so incredible. Your story and your perseverance is all so inspiring, not to mention the change that it engendered. Um, we, I think, has some similarities in that we've been lucky to not be alone in this at all. But in different ways, like internationally, there are other countries that have renamed it that we can point to. There's this data from survivors and the statement pieces they've put out. And then also just, here at home, there are other organizations and groups who also support that language use too. So it's really neat to see. And I can't wait to see the changes that will come further once October 10th rolls around and the name's replaced in the criminal code.
That's fantastic. Um, so a couple other questions from the very engaged crowd here. Molly asks, what was the process for the name change? It looks like their organization is trying to change their name of an approach we designed, but struggling to find the right option and timing amongst projects and other work. Oh, I hear you on that, Molly. We don't want to lose that recognition, but we do see a strong need for change. So how do you make that happen?
So we did focus groups, and so we engaged our clients. And so we had a third party. So I cannot take credit for the name change. We had a creative genius working with us with Vitreo Consulting, and they talked to so many focus groups and individuals, and they themed it. And basically, it was a phrase that our clients were using. They just kept saying they learned that fear was not love, fear is not love, and the consultants went, fear is not love. So they came forward with one name. So there weren't three to choose from. There it was, and they just presented it, and I sat there with it and a group of us, and we just said, okay. So it was kind of a weird process. But it was, I think, sitting with it and allowing just something to come forward that was a statement. And then so we didn't overcomplicate it. We just kept it to we did give them parameters though. We wanted it to be a value statement and a movement. So we didn't want it to be a descriptive name. So we defined that in the process, and then we just allowed it to emerge from lots of conversations.
Well, and somebody else has asked to, kind of along those same lines, they're finding it challenging to get the media to use some of these terms. We sometimes try to respond to media and ask them to use specific terms or align them with an international definition that is different from general use, and it is a challenge. It feels like we're doing a lot of defining and a lot of explaining. Katelin?
Yeah, I will say when we put those emails together, they're not super quick. It is a challenge, right? It takes a lot of really careful work and thought to, again, the process I'll usually use is explain some of the potential downsides with the language they're using, whether or not that might correspond to the attendee situation. I'm not sure, but I suspect so. If there is a preference you have, explaining the positives associated with using the language that you're proposing. And then, I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier, but I'll often, to try and keep the email short and hopefully likely to be read and digested, at the end, we'll often have a few links to resources from organizations who are not us. I mean, we've got, I think, a pretty good reputation, but it can also be really helpful to, in our circumstance, say, refer to, oh, look, here's what the RCMP has, or here is the United Nations, and so on, to add a little bit of extra clout and legitimacy and make clear that it's not just us saying this. And if they want extra, I kind of frame it as something like, oh, if you're interested in learning more, check out these resources, so that the email itself is pretty tight and hopefully doesn't seem overwhelming. But yeah, I can certainly empathize. And I would just want to commend you for that work. And I hope that over time you'll see some change as well.
We've done
So,
a
ladies, we've only got a few minutes left. Is there anything else that you folks? I mean, unfortunately, I would love to sit and chat with you for like 2 hours, but we're going to be moving on. So, is there anything else that you want to let people know before we say goodbye today? Kim?
The only thing I would say is we've done a media toolkit that has our terminology for domestic violence and some of our more controversial terms that we sort of challenge, and we send it out every fall and every January. And then if there's been a domestic homicide, we send it out again just to the reporters, just to remind them, because after every homicide, there's the journalists turn over so much, right? And
Yeah.
so we just make sure that we send it out regularly, so that just as a refresher, that please respectfully use this language. Yeah.
That's actually that's a great idea, and as a journalist, I fully endorse doing that. Just as that reminder, it's always helpful because we're busy people and things are happening so quickly, and you can fall into those traps of using old language. So that's a great idea. Katelin?
I think that it's such a pleasure to be here. It's so encouraging to, sometimes you might feel like you're shouting into the abyss alone, but it's really great reminder to know that there are other folks who care about language, who are fighting the good fight, and that changes can come of it. So thanks so much for having us.
Thank you. Kim, Katelin, thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us today. I encourage everybody to stick around for the next session. We will be closing this session. You have to go back to Zoom into the lobby and join the next session, which will start in about 7 minutes. So take a quick break. Please stretch, get some water. If you're working at home like me, pet your cat. And I hope to see you all in the next session. Thank you so much.